Christina Trauthwein, VP of Content and Creative for Hotel Business and Inspired Design. Welcome to our virtual panel series, Hot Topics. Today's session is Planning Ahead, Returning to Meetings and Business Travel. I know that's something we all want to do. Today I'm joined by a panel of experts who will shed some light on the topic. They are Tony Antolino, Chief Commercial Officer for Delos, Cindy Estis Green, COO and co-founder of Kalibri Labs, Gretta Brooks, founder and CEO of SalesBoost LLC, Tamara Laster, VP of Global Sales Strategy at IHG, and Michael Dominguez, President and CEO of Associated Luxury Hotels International, or ALHI. Let's just take a minute to go over the format. The session is an hour long. I'll moderate the session with questions for the group of panelists, but I'm encouraging a lively discussion amongst them. And I'll leave about 10 to 15 minutes at the end and maybe take a break at the halfway points to provide an opportunity for attendees to ask the panelists questions. So if you have a question, please type your question into the Q&A box, not the chat, and I'll try to get to as many as possible. We will be covering this Hot Topics session in the September 15th issue of Hotel Business on hotelbusiness.com, as well as via social media on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. The session is being recorded, and it will also be available on demand online. Also, I'd like to take a moment to thank our partner for today's panel discussion, Delos. We're honored to collaborate with this company to provide you this pertinent and timely information. So welcome to all of you, and we're going to begin. So we realize that meetings and group business is critical to returning to pre-pandemic business levels. Does it return? And if so, what can be done to provide confidence for meeting planners and guests? And I thought, Cindy, you could maybe start us off with some stats, and I know, Gretta, you can add on to that.
Yes, of course. So the groups and meetings and the whole commercial end of the business has, as everybody knows, has been a more delayed recovery. It's started finally, but there's been limitations. You know, some of the larger corporate accounts have restricted their budgets for this year. So that, you know, we anticipate next year will be much better. So, you know, we were down 64% in commercial business through the COVID period, which is pretty substantial. And just to give some context, there's in 2019, the commercial, we separate the business commercial and leisure, and we have also the group and the transient breakdowns. But in aggregate, the commercial business was 53% of guest paid revenue, and the leisure business was 47% in 2019, just as sort of a baseline. But of the group business, 2/3 of it is commercial. So when that goes away, that's kind of a big chunk of the business. And overall commercial declined 64%. Leisure declined, of course, also during COVID, but only by about 47%. So we've seen the leisure business come back already. By the end of May and June, we've been at or above 2019 levels. For commercial business, we're still down by half, about 49%. So we're expecting it is a gradual return, and our forecast has us, you know, on the commercial side getting back, you know, by the end of 22, you know, to something like 80% of the transient levels. The group will take a little bit longer lead time. The larger groups, I mean, there's going to be obviously big differences based on size of group, but somewhere between 60 and 70% return by the end of 22 for that group business, just to give some high level numbers.
Great. Gretta, do you want to add on to any of that?
Sure. You know, I think what's really interesting about the business that's coming back is we're hearing a lot of news about what, you know, all these folks that have gone back or that are potentially now able to work anywhere. So there's 40% of corporate business or corporate workforce that can work from anywhere. But the good news is that the segment that's coming back within corporate are small to mid-sized companies. So as Cindy said, you may not get the big companies coming back, but what's really important is to be laser focused on where we prioritize our efforts. So your small to mid-sized businesses are running to travel. They're trying to travel quickly because there's a competitive environment out there. They want to be first advantage. They want to be in their customer space to build those relationships. So that's a really critical component. And then looking at some of the McKinsey studies and talking to Nolan Group as well, we're looking at the data within the meetings. I know, Mike, you've got lots of data about this as well. But, the reason for traveling, whether it's corporate or for meetings, first and primary is sales, really getting out there and building those relationships. So being focused on providing resources for sales meetings and internal meetings, structure meetings, will be really the hot topics and where we need to focus our energy and our efforts.
Okay. Well, Mike, if you have a lot of data, let's hear some.
Well, a couple of things. I think as an industry, and something we keep preaching is we need to be skating to where the puck is going to be, not where the puck is. And these conversations that we're having, and Gretta's completely right. We are seeing the smaller companies that are, and when she says that running, it's in the short term if you're looking at 2021. What we're seeing for 2022, and I can just tell you from ALHI, just in June, we got to 92% of unique lead levels of 2019 in June. And to give you some perspective, that went from 400 in January to 1,600 in June. It is a massive increase, and every month it's been increasing by 25, 30%. What's more important is we booked about $30 million of total business, future business. It was 31 actually, and it was 31.9 in 2019 for June. So we're back to that kind of booking. And the only thing I would add to what Gretta said, we already see the big stuff coming back into 22. And one thing our industry has not talked enough about is the compression of meeting space, not guest rooms, but the compression of meeting space that is existing, because we took 3 years worth of meetings, crushed them into 2 years, and now we're getting into normal booking cycles of 18 to 24 months. And those people are looking for new meetings and realized, okay, I have things parked where I thought they wouldn't be. And one of the things I've stressed, if we have metro or urban hotels that are on this, one of the things that is going to be an advantage, they don't have the compression that the resort destinations do. And we keep pushing the planners. You may be looking to go to San Diego, and unfortunately, you're not going to find it, but it may be sitting wide open in Chicago, San Francisco, New York, because they don't have the large citywides yet. I think because of that, while we've been estimating that it's going to take longer for the metro to come back, the compression is going to help. There is a reality it's going to take longer because they're missing the citywides, but that compression is going to start to feed. And usually it's the compression in the metro that feeds the rest, the top 25, that feeds the rest of the country. I think it's going to be the reverse effect right now, because you have the rest of the country getting really compressed, and that compression is going to help the metro areas that are going to take longer to recover because business travel, international is not back, and the large citywide's not back. But we are seeing it, and you asked, will it come back? It's already here. What we are finding is everywhere that we are meeting, we are blowing through our attendance numbers. And I can tell you that it's problematic for the meeting planner because they're being conservative with their contracts and their room blocks, and then they're blowing through it. And these hotels have such leisure demand and other business in there, they can't move the blocks. And we're already starting to find that. That's a good problem to have. Yeah. But it's a healthy discussion in this, because when you said, will it be back? It's not only going to be back, it's here. But the problem is we're looking at right now, and everything Cindy's telling you is what we're seeing right now, and that's accurate. But what we're seeing booking into the future, we're already back to normal. Mm-hmm. And you're going to see that very quickly when it comes to attendance and the demand for meetings. Most of these travel restrictions, by the way, with companies, we're finding it not to be financial. We're finding it to be tied to liability. And the biggest issue we see is September. The reason everyone's talking about September, it has nothing to do with COVID. It has nothing to do with liability. It has to do with schools being open, so people have somewhere to place their kids. Childcare has been the biggest issue around that. And there's no reason to push that until they can get past the point that schools are actually going to be open in most states. That's why September is the big deal. And I'll close with one other point. This is my 48th trip since July. Yes, I have been traveling. I was tested twice. And there are bubbles in this country where people have not left and they don't understand that people have been traveling. And it's quite busy in those destinations. And because of our portfolio, I was visiting our hotels, looking at the protocols, understanding it. We also put on, this is our 27th meeting since July that ALHI has put on for the industry to teach planners how to meet in the protocol. And if there's any real positive, we're not talking about protocols anymore.
Right.
The clients aren't asking about protocols. The clients are asking about, how do I get people there? Because there's not enough air service. So that's more of our issue. But I think the answer to, will it be back? Yes, we're seeing it back.
So Mike,
yeah, Michael, I wanted to.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to jump on what you were saying as well, Michael, because I agree that it is back. And you mentioned hotels a couple of times. Being from a supplier perspective, we're seeing obviously that leisure here, but we're also seeing the bounce back in the groups and meetings as well. You know, one thing we've talked about is a trend in groups and meetings is going to have to be creativity. You're absolutely right. Some of those urban markets are going to be a little bit slower to see an increase in groups and meetings because of the lack of citywides, and still, there's still some concern out over here about the variants and all of those different things. So how do we utilize our hotel space in a more creative way? The SME market, the small and medium-sized market, has been the most resilient market so far. They've had to travel because they're scrappy. And frankly, I think out of a lot of the different decisions that were made from how to, furloughing perspective and people getting severances and, how at least I know how the hospitality industry was impacted, but also the workforce overall. I think we're going to see this huge increase in small businesses crop up from people who have had a minute to step back from during COVID, and really think about their future and how they want to, kind of move forward now that they've been furloughed or let go, whatever those things are. So I actually believe that there's going to be this, you talk about compounded annual growth rate. I think you're going to see SME business go off the chart. And so having the ability to be creative, use our hotels creatively for small meetings, simple meetings, that kind of day in, day out type of travel is something that we're looking at in terms of what happens moving forward, because I do think it's a trend that's going to last. And you mentioned, the conversations about the protocol. Look, all of us in the supplier industry has some sort of cleanliness protocol. IHG with Clean Promise. The key is going to be managing the attendee expectation around what to expect in their group of meetings. I honestly believe that being able to deliver an amazing group of meetings starts with the planners managing expectations, understanding where the meeting is taking place, what are the protocols from a local perspective in terms of the restrictions, how they're handling mask mandates and all of those different things like social distancing, making sure the attendees are aware of that, and then really understanding what from our meeting planners is going to make a good meeting and what's important to that meeting planner. So we cater the meeting to what it needs to be to support the cleanliness efforts, but also to make sure that we don't have a problem with the experience and the service.
Right. You know what? I'm going to actually jump onto that point and then Tony bring you in here as well. So how can we as an industry provide confidence that in-person events can be safe? And also, safety and comfort are crucial elements in the travel experience, but sometimes to achieve one of them, the other can suffer. So how does the travel industry give customers more control over their sense of safety and comfort?
I can definitely jump in. So we really think about it in a couple of ways, right? There's consumer behavior, consumer expectations, and consumer comfort. I think we as stakeholders in the industry, we have somewhat of an obligation to try and satisfy those concerns by, and Tamara just said it, really communication strategy is key. As the pandemic recedes and people are out traveling more for business, doing meetings, having those dinners again, building those relationships again, rekindling those relationships, forming new relationships, it's really mission critical for the meeting spaces, the hotels, et cetera, to be able to communicate what has been done to really just give peace of mind. right? People do want to get back. I traveled recently. I've not done as many flights as Michael, but it does feel good to get back and to be face-to-face with people. And in sales, that's what we live on. It's the relationships. But in the colleagues that I've spoken with during my travels, people want to get back, but they also want that peace of mind. And so what we've been thinking about, obviously Delos cares a lot about how the environment affects the human condition in the spaces we spend our time. We think about it in two ways. One, on the Delos side, what can we do to improve the indoor environment, right? So air purification and remediating pathogen concern, even in different hot pockets, whether there's a concern present or that's still acute or not, we want to be able to provide those healthy spaces. So there are healthy interventions that can be incorporated, cost-effective, portable, real simple to implement, that have high impact. It's a visual cue when people are in that space that a measure has been taken. And it oftentimes doesn't even require a conversation that something has been done. It's visual, it's a cue, people have comfort. On the other side, you mentioned protocols and guidelines. Another concern that we're seeing from the consumer is that they want to understand that a facility has undergone health and safety protocols that have their health and safety in mind. And oftentimes it's not enough, especially during a pandemic, for someone to say, no, trust me, we've done it, right? The bigger the company, the more likely there is to have experts and more strict guidelines and protocols that have been carefully vetted. But we continue to see, hear, and experience that a third-party validation of those protocols and guidelines have been vetted and validated. And through our wholly owned subsidiary, the International Well Building Institute, last year we brought forward the Well Health Safety Rating, which is well over 1 billion square feet in tens of thousands of facility types, from hotels to sport venues and restaurants and commercial office and everything in between. And communicating that those validations have been done is really going a long way in making people feel more comfortable and confident going back to the places that are important to them.
Right. So like at IHG or at your organization, Mike, how are you helping to communicate these messages? How are you helping to put some of these safety protocols out there enough so people know that you're concerned also about their concerns?
Yeah, well, I would go first. I'm sorry, Tamara, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm sorry about that, Michael. Yeah, so I think for IHG, we've done a couple of things, right? So one is the, RFP process is a really great time to communicate that to customers. So we actually created a database to be able to show what our individual hotels have been doing from a cleanliness perspective and the cleanliness protocols that they have in place. So we actually did something like that last year where customers could just grab that information as they needed to and look at this database and that was updated on a weekly basis. And we would actually also send out to our customers, hey, there's a new update, take a look at it here. So I think that's the first thing. And then internally, what we're doing is we're making sure that our hotels are meeting those standards. I mean, our brand teams, our franchise performance support teams, it behooves us to make sure that our franchisees and our hotels are meeting the cleanliness status because we want you back, right? And so it doesn't help us if it's an espoused versus practiced belief, right? And so what we do is we have those sort of checks and balances that occur on an ongoing basis with our individual hotels to make sure that they're following the proper protocols. And that's what we are trying to do to make sure that our owners, as well as our guests and our planners understand that we take it seriously.
Okay. Mike?
And, it would be interesting to start with ditto because all of that is consistent and it's necessary today. But I would add, we have multiple hotels and multiple independent hotel brands that are part of ALHI that have actually already earned the Well Health Safety Rating and that seal. And what I loved about what Delos did, and believe me, not a Delos commercial, everybody knows about me and Delos. I really love what they do because it's always based in science. And what I loved about their rating is that they were taking our protocols and mapping them to the appropriate science to say, this is why we're doing it and this is what we're doing. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention about the good work that I have co-chaired the Events Industry Council's task force on COVID recovery. We have work streams that have been placed, and in the hotel work stream, what Tamara just talked about, in that workbook, you can click on the IHG tab and you will go straight to IHG, but you could go to every other brand. You could go to the independents. It is a broad perspective for people to be able, and it's an open source content platform, so anybody can access it. But the work we've tried to put together was, how can we aggregate and curate all this information that's out there? Because to the point earlier, every hotel company has it just named something different. Right. And for a consumer, that becomes confusing. How do we clarify that? And we've been doing that. But I think one thing as a hotel industry we haven't done well, I keep explaining to our clients that we didn't go from 0 to 60. We cleaned up the last 20%. We've always been very focused on cleanliness. We're now focused on having to clean for an airborne pathogen. That's different. But that doesn't mean hotels were laxed at all in cleaning. And you should have that as the starting point. That what we had to do as an industry is figure out what we all had to figure out in life was, how do we deal with the virus? And how do we deal with an airborne pathogen? Because that has not been part of our normal protocols. And now we're focused, to Tony's point, on air and air quality and circulation and how important that is. I just think that's an important piece of the puzzle we keep forgetting. We keep trying to tell hotels or people that it's okay to come back to the hotels. It was important to say, we've always been safe. We've always cared about your safety. It's our duty of care. It's what we're supposed to do. But we all had to figure this piece out as the world figured it out. And I just think that's an important piece to continue to communicate, that we didn't have to clean up everything. We had to really focus on this problem that was in front of us, that was a global epidemic.
Mike, that's so important. People have become overnight experts on subjects that we really just took kind of for granted. Like you said, we select our hotels because they're reputable and they take good care of us, and a duty of care is there. But now with the pandemic, unfortunately, people have become more aware that what surrounds us matters, right? We didn't think about touching surfaces. We always had some Purell or washed our hands or what have you, but surface contamination earlier in the pandemic was a heightened concern. People became experts on hand hygiene. When did anyone ever say the words hand hygiene? Like, never, right? But that became something that we became acutely aware of. Now science tells us that that's no longer a primary transmission concern, but the airborne pathogen concern and airborne transmission, right? These are new ways of talking. We didn't talk about, viral transmission and airborne transmission. These were not things as part of our day-to-day conversations. But with that level of awareness does come an increased responsibility to solve for those problems and then communicate them. So that'll be a recurring theme that I think we'll see through all aspects of the value chain.
Definitely.
So, Christina, I just wanted to bring up, I know everybody talks about the downside, and it's hard to avoid when we had, the industry kind of crushing downturn that we did. But there's a lot of upside too. And I think there's more upside now. There are some silver linings, and there's residual benefit that we're going to get. So, while everybody, there may be more of this hybrid work, part-time in the office, part-time from home, what we've seen in our data is longer lengths of stay. So people attend a meeting or they have a business trip and they've got Friday and Monday, they can work remotely somewhere. And what we're seeing, the way that comes out in the data, is longer lengths of stay. And what used to be the shoulder periods that were the worst nights, the Thursday and Sunday, are now second only to weekend. So I think that filling in those nights, it's not going to be a displacement issue when the business comes back. That's incremental new business. And I think when meetings come back, promoting that is actually going to deliver some leisure business that might not have happened, or maybe it always happened a little bit, but I think the opportunity is for it to happen a lot more and to create business. Again, it's not displacement when the Monday to Wednesday gets filled in again. Yeah. These are nights of the week that were kind of soft, and they were always that way for 30 years. They've been that way. And all of a sudden we can start filling them, which means that we can be looking at higher occupancies from this kind of business leisure. You've got your commercial transient or your business traveler who now has the opportunity to do the Thursday, Sunday, because they can work Friday and Monday from anywhere. And I think I wouldn't understate that. That's worth a lot to the industry. I mean, we lost what we lost. I mean, we were down almost $100 billion last year. But this is business that could come back as a residual that will be sustained potentially, and it could be promoted within the group and meetings community and within the BT community as advantages for traveling to be able to tag on that night before, night after. And of course, we did that on an ad hoc basis. I think it's going to be taken more seriously, and we may get some really good traction and end up better than we were before, which is, to me, very exciting.
That's very encouraging.
Yeah.
And Gretta, I see you shaking your head a lot up and down. So what do you want to add to this?
Yeah, I think the trick here is to educate and get these packages, get this revenue strategy. I wanted to talk to Tamara about that, because anytime you have a business traveler in, you have the opportunity to add the leisure component and extend the stay. Anytime you have leisure, you have the opportunity to extend the business, side of things. And so really extending the stays for occupancy's sake is really a huge opportunity that I know a lot of our customers are taking advantage of and retraining their team members to make sure that they're, whether it's reservations, whether it's group blocks, leisure, corporate, backyard, local business strategies, it's all about the length of stay right now. So the ADR isn't really much of an issue, it's length of stay.
But it could be part of the negotiation for both the BT accounts as well as the groups and meetings accounts to include that as a standard offering, which is a huge win for everybody. And I mean, we are seeing 1 to 1.5 night extension on length of stay. That's massive. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's really huge. So can we continue that? We have the capacity because those Thursday and Sundays were so light. So again, we're not going to get into displacement issues when the sort of quote unquote normal business comes back. So to me, this is, we still have some time where the kids are back in school, as somebody brought up, and September is, concerning because that leisure business that was like that pent-up demand, your kids are back in school, you may have a place for the kids to go, but you're not going to be taking them with you in the way that people could do before. So I think we're going to have a little, sort of leveling off before some of the natural groups, meetings, and BT business comes back. But when it comes back, I'm very excited about this incremental new type of business that existed in a very, small way before, but we could actually institutionalize it, and we should.
Yes, Mike.
No, I was going to say, I'm so glad that Cindy mentioned, because I believe in the silver lining. We see it. I love that she mentioned about the leveling off, because one of the things I keep stressing to our partners is it's a good time to be decisively indecisive. But you need to understand, don't make definitives on what we know right now, because we don't know where it's all going to settle down. Because to Cindy's point, one of the reasons people are adding is because they haven't traveled in a year.
Yeah.
But when you're starting to travel all the time, you may not want the extra night. You may want to get to your home because you're always on the road. And that's not discounting that I don't think the trend's going to last. But to her point is, it'll level off a little bit. And I think that's where you have to temper what we're seeing. The leisure demand we're seeing in hotels, that's easy when the world's cut off for travel.
Right.
And I keep trying to tell some of our hotels, I go, get every dollar you can right now. But realize, don't be predetermining that that's what it's going to look like in January, when we can finally travel to Europe and we can go to the Caribbean without testing and we can go around the world. Those pieces, we're kind of in a bubble right now. And I just think it's important to understand, that's where I keep talking about where we are right now and where the hockey puck's going to be. And we should capture everything we should know, but we almost have to think of things in 6-month increments as we start to come out of this. So I'm glad Cindy said that. That's where my head was going with it.
Yeah.
Okay. So we know that a large component of conventions is F&B. So does the industry need to reimagine some of the F&B offerings in terms of buffets and large shared tables and so forth?
Yeah, I'll say that we're starting to do that right now, right? I mean, and we have been doing it since COVID. I mean, we started with grab and go. Now we're looking at sort of what are the creative ways to have our F&B services provided. So what does that look like? Does it look like, socially distanced tables in the restaurant space? How do we manage the restaurant space for our attendees? What does it look like for a meeting, right? Does the buffet look like a grab and go? It's all of those pieces, and how do we creatively use the space in a way that's safe, right? People, it's really interesting to watch people come back because our guests still very much remember what travel used to look like. And I think those expectations still exist, right? When they come to a meeting, they want to have the drinks at the bar, and they want to be able to have the sit down tables, rounds, and things like that. But I think we have to figure out what is the right and the safest way to do that. And I think we've started to figure out when to introduce that kind of F&B grab and go, those types of offerings, and who that's the best for. Is that good for sports teams, right? That's probably the right thing for sports teams. Maybe it's not the right thing for a corporate group, right? And then if we do, sort of those, the traditional F&B, what does that look like in terms of using the space in a safe way? So, a lot of learnings we still have there, but we are thinking about what that looks like.
Okay.
I would add to that, Tamara, that, so many hotels are looking at utilizing every square foot of space, really that whole total revenue opportunity, right? Not just RevPAR, but total RevPAR. And what's really critical is understanding every square foot of space. Even if there's a patch of grass, stick a table on it, because people want to have their own personalized comfort related to where they want to network. And so we have lobbies, but they want more seating. They want to be around people, but they also want to have a safer environment where if they want to sit outside and be in the fresh air, they have a place to go. So a lot of hotels, especially resorts, jumped all over that because they could see customers running outside and sitting everywhere. And I think for those urban properties, they just need to maximize their space in a way that allows people to branch out. They can maximize that networking opportunity. The reason why people like to get together is to be, to collaborate and network. So I think it's an important component, especially related to safety.
Right.
Yeah, and I can tell you some of the larger meetings that I've attended recently, and the largest one would have been MPI, World Education Congress, with over 1,000 people. It got pretty normal pretty quickly. And I mean that. You're looking at Nevada that had gone to 0 protocols. And because of that, it became mask optional because of what the CDC guidelines were. There were some people in masks, there were some people that weren't. Social distancing wasn't really a consideration at that point, and it felt pretty normal. And I say that because, again, I can't reiterate enough, when we're talking about what it is right now versus when you start to see it come back, and how quickly people get back to some normalcy, I think we're going to get to normal pretty quickly. But here's the thing. I hope normal never is a round of 10 again, just from a comfort level. The 8s and 6s, and I've talked about this often, is when we were running these meetings in those protocols, having tables of 4 and we were at 4 most of it. Recently, we've been at 6. The level of engagement and conversation at the table, because it doesn't become conversations of 2, have been phenomenal. But that's not a safety discussion. And that's my thing. We keep talking about safety and protocols. We're not going to be in this environment forever and having this discussion, but they're learnings. And those are the silver linings that Cindy mentioned. Some of the silver linings is it's much more engaged to actually have that conversation. And we've been recommending the planners, and this was a learning from COVID, but it should continue from a service aspect, is there is not a lobby bar in the world that is prepared for 300 people breaking from their dinner and going to crash it. And we've all experienced it. We've all seen it. When you got done with your dinner, we're going, and this postage stamp of a lobby bar that was meant to be a lobby bar is now crammed. But we've been telling planners is, they're going to do that. So why don't you just turn your bar into a cash bar and keep them in the room? Saying, look, if you want to mingle and you can actually set it up so that you can do that, why don't you take all that pressure off the hotel already still keep it going, and you don't have to worry. You don't have to pick up the tab. You can close off the open bar, turn it into a cash bar, which was going to be the cash bar anyway when they got to the bar. I think those are some of the learnings coming out of it. We did that from a safety perspective, but we think it's going to be a great opportunity for us just from a service experience standpoint to be able to recommend that.
So that's a good segue. Oh, someone else want to say something?
I was just saying revenue. I mean, it's a good time to take a look at all the opportunities. Every square foot has revenue opportunities. So, use that creativity to expand that. Yeah, absolutely right.
So actually, Mike, since you actually kind of brought this up and said this, I kind of looked into the Q&A from our audience, and I do see a question that touches upon what you just said. And even from personal experience, we've all been traveling and going to trade shows and conventions, and there's quite a few lined up in the next few weeks. And it was kind of, when I got back, everyone was so interested to know, how was it? Was it like it used to be? And I have to be honest with you, it really actually kind of was. I remember, do you remember us all talking about no one's going to handshake anymore? And everyone was trying to think of the next thing to do, fist bump. I have to tell you, we shook hands and even hugged.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. So to go to this question from an audience member, it says, there's been a lot of talk of new normal. Does the panel think travel is going to change that drastically, or really will we just return to business as usual?
I think it'll open new opportunities like we talked about, whether it's, expanding the bar experience to enhance the, provide a more comfortable environment for the attendees, or extending stays on the Thursdays and Mondays. I mean, I think those things will be new. But having now been, I also was at an 1,100 person event at Hunter, and I and Christina, we hugged, it was like by the second day, everybody was hugging, and you just feel like it's kind of normal. And I've now had 5 or 6 trips, and it feels kind of normal. Like, sure, you put on a mask if you're in a tight space. I mean, it's nice when you're in a meeting room to have a little more space and a little more distance between people. But it's true, when they had 6 at a table instead of the rounds of 10, you do engage more with the others. Like, it actually is a better experience. So I don't think it's going to be, I think we're going to just get back into traveling. And once everyone has the safety issues kind of down pat and we're comfortable with that, I think we're going to kind of revert back in a lot of ways to the way it was. But some of the new things, like we've talked about, may become sustained as well. And I think they're good for business. And I think it'll make for a better experience for the attendees as well.
The amazing thing is that people are adaptable, right? We see this over the course of time when there are seismic shifts, events happen, and it forever changes our trajectory. We never go back exactly to the way that it was. Some of the greatest innovations happen during those tumultuous times, and that's good for business across all sectors. People behaviorally are adaptable also. So once we come out of the acute phase, which we are, we're now traveling more and we can move around more. We go to restaurants and get on planes and hug and be at meetings, even if there's an anticipation of another wave, which is being talked about in the fall. We're adaptable. We've already experienced what an acute phase or phases are. We're going to push right through that. We all want to get back to business. We all want to try and resort back to what normalcy is. Normalcy will never be what it used to be. We just adapt and we move forward.
Yeah, Anthony, I agree with you. I agree with what Cindy said as well. I think there's a real desire for things to go back to normal. I too was at an event a couple of weeks ago and no one had on masks, and I hugged so many people. It was wonderful. But I do think from a hotel perspective, things will change, at least in the short term. And they may not be permanent changes, but they will be some things that change in the short term. As we all are aware, there are the labor shortages that are happening. That impacts the staff at our hotels. So things like where housekeeping was initially always as part of the service, I think you'll see that in certain cases, if there's a labor issue, you will see that hotels will say, do you want housekeeping? Do you not want housekeeping? And I think there's going to be an introduction of levels of housekeeping as well. Hey, listen, do you want me to just give you towels every day? Do you want me to just clean, just take out your trash? And I think you're going to see that, at least in the short term, based upon kind of what the labor market looks like. So we'll get there. We'll get back to normal. But in the short term, there will be some changes.
So that's perfect because, Tamara, I was going to ask too, like, how will the labor challenge in our industry, what we're facing right now, impact the recovery of the meetings business? And our host locations, are they staffed for big meetings and conventions?
Yeah, I think, that's a hard question to answer. I think, there are some hotels that are very well staffed and there are others that are not. If I'm being honest, right there, people were given severances, so they're probably still, working through their severance. People have had an opportunity to reevaluate what next steps look like for their career. I'll say that there are some hotels where we have the staffing, you'll feel less of an impact on that group or meeting. Where there's the staff concern, there'll be a lot of conversations during the planning of the meeting on what's a must-have versus what's a nice-to-have. I think that's what you're going to see moving forward, so that we work together in our communication to manage attendee and planner expectations. So I think that's what you'll see.
Yeah, and I can add, what we've seen as an industry, and there's a few pieces that we don't talk about enough, but childcare was a big issue, and it still is. And the same thing I was talking about, people getting back to the office, our service staff particularly depends on childcare, and in most states it wasn't open, that had been really restrictive. That has been really detrimental for us getting people back. It is not a secret that the added extra unemployment for a portion of our service attendees as well. And I always say unintended consequence on trying to take care of people. Nobody expected it to come back as quickly as it did, but it was problematic. And in the 25 states that have already cut it, we've seen an uptick in that labor coming back. So I expect that again by September to come back. But our industry does not talk enough about the H-2B visa issue in this country. And unfortunately, we're opening up during our seasonal peak period when we've always depended on international seasonal labor that we cannot have. So you already have a shortage where we used to get extra, we don't have. And that is what is really condensing the industry right now. If this would have happened in January or March, different.
We would have a problem, right?
It happening in the spike of summer when we always depend on international part-time seasonal labor, that's gone. And we hit our cap in January. So because of the limitations on that, we can't expand it. But even if we could, you're not allowed to travel here from those countries. So it really doesn't matter. It's problematic right now. We do think that is going to be taken on. And it's a discussion we're still having. I'm part of the U.S. Travel Association's exec committee. That is a discussion we're having with Washington because we need to address it for our industry, specifically from a labor perspective.
Gretta?
Yeah, I think that there are a few factors that are big open questions that nobody knows yet. One has to do with the labor issue. This could be short-term, very difficult, and we will gradually recover, or we may have persistent problems. And I know there's moves toward robotics and other things for certain tasks in order to accommodate that. The second major open question is, will corporate workers be in a hybrid mode, or are they going to go full-time back to their office? Because it's going to change the nature of the BT business. And again, there's favorable parts of that. And then there's also questions as to, what portion. We've never really segmented that business to think about the sales and client-facing part of commercial travel, which of course is getting back right away. And then there's the intra-company travel, where somebody could say, well, we really don't need to do that anymore because Zoom worked fine and we don't need to spend that money. On the other hand, there's the opportunity potentially, if there's hybrid workers, to require more meetings and more meeting space for teams to get together because they're scattered all over, and it could create a new segment of groups and meetings business. The third major question that's unknown is, are the CFOs of these companies going to loosen the belt a little on travel to enable more than just that required client-facing travel? And is that going to happen over 2 years or 3 years, or is it going to happen kind of more quickly than that? So I feel like we have some unknowns that we just have to see how it plays out, whether it'll be, sustained change because of COVID or just short-term transition, and we'll kind of revert back. And I don't think anyone knows the answer yet.
Gretta, I think you want to.
Yeah, there's a stat to that. Thank you. There's a stat to that from McKinsey, which I thought was interesting. 58% of corporate executives that were just asked this month, in June, what their travel plans are for hybrid and meetings and those type of things and travel. They really don't have a plan. They're playing it by ear. So, we won't know until we know. But 60% of corporate America is getting back up and running and traveling. It's just, again, as we said earlier, it's small to mid-size. So those expectations are different. But one thing I think is really interesting to know is regional travel seems to have come back. Cindy, do you have stats on that? So regional travel is coming back first. And those large meetings or the large types of thought processes are doing more regional meetings instead of one big one. So that's a conversation that our customers are dealing with, wrangling as well. So packages, collections of properties are trying to go out and take the big meeting and chop it up into regional subsections so they can get those hybrid meetings in person.
So we see of the 975 submarkets that we track, which makes up the US, almost 500 of them are going to be, by the end of 21, between 80 and over 100% of their 2019 levels. And those are kind of the smaller submarkets in locations that are attractive to the small and medium-sized kind of companies. So, on the other end of the spectrum, we have, maybe 150 that are still, by the end of 21, going to be 50% or greater, worse than, less than 50% compared to 2019. And then you've got, another 350 in the middle. So yes, there's a whole bunch of locations. There's a whole bunch of hotels that are doing just fine. But, if you're in a location that's dependent on the really large corporate accounts that just haven't revved up the engines yet for either safety reasons or the kid's not back in school yet or lots of things, that's the business that is, the place where the major markets, the big urban areas are dependent on that kind of business. And those are the markets that are going to just take longer to come back.
So Cindy, you kind of touched upon this in your answer, and there's probably not one concrete answer to this, but I'm going to the Q&A here from our audience. And the person says, given comments on large companies versus small companies, if we think about large banks, for instance, is it your understanding that they're pushing to get employees back in the office, yet don't want them traveling to meetings out of concern for it's related to lingering COVID and variant concerns?
I can talk to that. It's not,
okay.
It's financial and insurance that have been most restrictive. And if you think about risk assessment and their thought around risk, it makes sense that financial and insurance were a little more restrictive. Insurance more than financial. But when you have Goldman ordering people back into the office in June, you have JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, they're making it very clear. You're coming back to the office or you're not working for us. And what we do know is those large corporations will start to bleed to other corporations as far as their decisions, because it will create that anxiety that they're a step ahead of us.
Right.
And that is what is starting to happen. You needed the biggest players, but underneath the radar that hasn't been talked about is Google ordering their executives back to their office, Apple taking heat because they expect people to be in their $1 billion campus they just built, that they do expect them to be working in the office. I really do think the in the office thing is overplayed. People will be coming back. It will not be 5 days a week, 9 to 5, but you will find that 3 to 4 days a week, there's going to be an expectation that you will be in the spoke and hub model. You will come to the mothership, and then you might be able and have the flexibility to work from home when you need to. Gensler did the greatest study on that. Less than 12% of workers want to work from home full time.
Yeah.
And yet the narrative keeps coming, we're not coming back to the office. And, I heard the CEO of Cushman & Wakefield that talked about on CNBC, and he made the comment that in areas around the world that have opened up, and he was using an example, they were back to 99% of office lease of 2019. And he says it's telling him that where we open up, it will come back. And they're actually utilizing more space. And I think it can't be understated that the people that bought the most amount or leased the most amount of office space in 2020 to be able to fill are all tech companies. The Amazons, Googles, and Apples of the world bought a tremendous amount of space that they expect to occupy.
Right. But I think the best thing for the hotel industry is the hybrid model, because then we have the flexibility to get people to be doing their traveling and have those Fridays and Mondays and have the ability to expand their stay. And I think we want them in the office because that's how BT happens. You've got to have people in the office to meet with other people, So I think ideally, if we end up with some hybrid model, which wouldn't be a surprise to me, where they end up in an office, but it might be 3 or 4 days a week, I think we will end up with residual benefit as an industry.
Absolutely. Tony,
the hybrid model. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Tamara.
Yeah, the hybrid model is here to stay. I think it hasn't gotten the traction that we thought it would in the market because there's been a concern about the finances involved with that. But I do think that the simple sort of hybrid solutions are here to stay. I will say that in terms of some of the other pieces that you were talking about with going back to work and that sort of thing, I think we are going to see using hotels a little bit more for very sort of day meetings. I think we're going to see that start to pick up too. And I think we need to be prepared for that as people there are some companies that are saying, listen, we've let go of our office space. If people want to meet, they can meet. And that's great. But I do think also that, we were able to do well last year in 2020 because we had 3 months of in-person working through some of the things that you need to work through when you're starting off initiatives, right? We had baked in that time to innovate, to talk about our plans. And so we rode that high through the rest of the year. I think you're going to see this year and in upcoming years that because we have been working remotely, people are going to want to go back to work because they need that time to bake those ideas before they leverage that time in a work from home situation.
Tony, did you want to add something?
I do. I think, the rationale for why people want to stay in a hybrid work environment has got nothing to do with the pandemic and health and safety. People have realized that by being home, they want to try and have a better balance, whatever balance means for each of those individuals. And so having that flexibility gives families the ability to stay grounded, stay a little bit more connected, have another dinner, especially for the road warriors, right? It's nice to be home more than Saturday or Sunday or just one of those days if you got home before the weekend. So I think that adds an extraordinary opportunity, as has been talked about, to get the additional nights before or after. I do think that people will travel with their families and really piggyback business travel with some long weekends, right? Especially if the hybrid model sticks, which I think we all agree it's going to stick. That creates a great long-term opportunity. There is a cultural shift that's happening. It will shake out and it'll steady state at some point. But I think we are experiencing real behavioral changes to the benefit of the industry.
Okay, we only have 5 minutes left. So I always like ending these on a optimistic note. So we're going to go around and I just want each of you just a few sentences about a positive that came out of today's session and a positive reason for the industry to look forward to a lot of business travel, hopefully soon. Cindy, we're going to start with you.
Okay. So as I said, I think there is going to be residual benefit that will be sustained post-COVID. And I think that it will benefit both the transient business as well as the group business. And I think there's been this, strong pent-up demand for travel that we're going to benefit from, even if it's a big bump in the short term. I think that we're going to be able to expand the opportunities and the capacity for travel. And I feel very optimistic about the recovery. And even though I know that in some of the markets that were so heavily dependent on those large corporate accounts that may still take another couple of years to come back, I believe they will be coming back. So I'm very optimistic about the next few years.
Great. Tamara?
Yeah, I think the pandemic has allowed us to build an appreciation for travel that we didn't have before. And so it's incredibly missed. And we've been able to quantify the importance of face-to-face interaction and the innovation that comes through that. So I'm optimistic that we'll get there. It's going to take some time, like Cindy said, in some markets, but I'm optimistic that people want to travel versus feeling like they have to travel for business. And that's a great outcome of this pandemic.
Okay, Mike.
Today I love that the conversation was all about looking forward. And I think that's an important place for us to be as an industry and as a society. I'm really optimistic that it's the human condition. We are built to connect with people, and that has never gone away through history. It's never gone away through time, and that's where I know it comes back. And you heard so many people say, we're hugging and shaking hands and doing it immediately. It's part of our DNA, and because of that, I know I'm really optimistic, and I'm probably most encouraged that when people get back to traveling, ignorance in our world, to me, is only solved by experience and being educated by different cultures. And nothing does that better than travel. And I think that helps us as a society even larger than what it does as a hotel community.
Great. Gretta?
I chime in on everyone else that talks about the human connection and our need, but I think the industry itself is really challenged and has been challenged with being more creative. So I don't think there's a better time to join the hospitality industry than now. And I know it's hard because we're having a hard time, stumbling around with hiring folks. But what is amazing about it is we're actually showing how innovative we can be and how creative we are and what amazing problem solvers we are and what a great industry to be part of to create your career. So I hope that those listening will share that, because we want to attract the best and the brightest, and make sure they know how much we love and respect and honor this, because travel, as Michael said, it's the way for us to really learn and uncover and discover this world and more about ourselves and others. So hopefully we just continue traveling.
Good. And Tony?
I'm a consummate optimist, and I echo what's been said. The human condition is what drives society forward. We are social beings. We will have been since the dawn of time, and we will continue to be. Operationally, the pandemic has caused us to pay attention to some things that we did not have to pay attention to from an acute perspective. But you know what? I think this industry and other industry segments, we've showed resilience. And we've adapted, and we are forging forward and creating an environment for prosperity and innovation. And the growth on the backside of economic crisis typically comes back stronger than before. So I look forward to traveling more and more as the months tick on. I look forward to hugging more and more people and shaking hands at conferences and just getting back to normal for whatever that might be. So yeah.
Okay. It's 3:00, and before we wrap up, I just want to thank each of our panelists once again for spending their valuable time with us and sharing their keen insights. And again, a big thank you to Delos, our partner, for this informative session. And last but not least, thank you to the attendees who joined us today. Travel is picking up, certainly for leisure, and definitely on the upswing for business as well. So we have quite a few conferences and trade shows we're planning to attend in the next few weeks up to hotel business, and we hope to see you there. Thank you.